You're welcome to my banner. My guest is a member of parliament for Bekwai, and he's the ranking member on the Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Committee in Parliament. They examine all questions relating to constitutional, legal and parliamentary issues generally. And we know that Parliament has been on recess for about 3 months. They're going back today. So it's appropriate we raise some of the issues before his committee, and let's find out how we can deal with it. One of the issues very much outstanding, very much on our minds, is the Right to Information Bill, because we celebrated the day not too long ago. What is it about it? I mean, what's the difficulty? What's the challenge?
Well, I think there's no challenge, so to speak. When the bill came in the form that it came, many people thought that it did not give much rights to citizens. And so the committee had to go to a great length to bring the Ghana's proposed law, the bill, in conformity with the ECOWAS and the AU1. That involved a lot of detailed work and research. So far, we have done that. We've proposed several amendments that will make the Ghana's Right to Information Bill, when it passes, or Act when it passes, be in conformity with the ECOWAS, the proposed one, the ECOWAS guide, that all ECOWAS members should have this kind of right to information arrangement.
Is that better for us? Because, you know, why are we linking what we are doing with ECOWAS?
Well, we are part of the African region, West African region, and the ECOWAS Parliament and the ECOWAS institutions try to harmonize rules and regulations in the sub-region so that movement within will not be impeded by hiccups of what you're supposed to do here. When you go to another country, it is an offense. What you're entitled to do in one country, you're not permitted to do in another country. That makes movement within the sub-region difficult. So.
Okay, but it has not left the committee yet.
Oh, it has. The committee has finished its work, presented our report. The rest is for the business committee of the House to schedule it and put it on the agenda.
Okay.
Once it is there, the amendments. Some people are suggesting that if you look at the amount of amendments that have been proposed, it may be helpful for just let the Attorney General take it, but incorporate all the amendments and represent it so the passage becomes easier.
Okay.
The process of amending the bill is a very tedious one. You read line by line, sentence by sentence, comma to comma, and each change you propose requires a motion, a debate, and a vote. So if you're going to amend words, commas, full stops, and so on, it will take several sittings. So it's been proposed that, why don't you take it back, incorporate all the proposed amendments so that the new bill would capture exactly what Parliament wants it to be.
Have they agreed to this?
It's still a matter at the table.
But in the meantime, we still wait for it.
Yes. If that is not done, then we'll have to go through it.
So why don't you simply just go through the motions?
I'll pass on your...
Because, you know, that's why you're there.
I'll pass it on to the leadership of the House.
I've witnessed you take the air out of things before, and you can do it. You've been resting for 3 months. That's a very long time.
It's not necessarily a rest. When you're in the constituency, you're probably more stressed than when you're in the House.
There's another bill which you say has left the committee, which is the Property Rights of Spouses Bill.
That's right.
What is so controversial about the bill?
Now, I don't know whether to say controversial anymore, because we've been discussing them for quite a while. You see, when people are used to a certain set of thinking and practice, and then a law is introduced to change, it becomes difficult for people to accept the change. And therefore, discussion of it is always against the backdrop of set known practice. And that is why the discussion of this also always generates emotions. You know, the proposed bill now is suggesting that properties acquired between couples when they are alive, not when they die, when they are alive, to be shared
equally.
Okay. The Constitution said equal access. The source of the bill is the Constitution. Article 22 says Parliament shall pass a bill to regulate equal access for jointly acquired property. Here's a catch: jointly acquired. Now it's becoming difficult. What constitutes jointly acquired property? The issue of contribution. What constitutes contribution? These are the critical parts. And then you have situations where in customary setting, polygamous relationships, 1 man, 3 women, which contribution is higher, who has, those are, regulating those things are not easy. But a very great effort has been made in the proposals. However, some of them are a bit, as I said, controversial, and they have generated very emotional debates.
Okay,
but
so some such as, for instance, if we were to take into law what you have proposed, would we be better off?
I think so, except that there's still, should I say, the jury is still out as to what constitutes contribution in a situation where one of the couples is staying home to manage the house while the other goes out to work. And then property is acquired by the one going out to work. And the suggestion is that being home to manage the home, taking care of the children, doing household chores, cleaning the house, is or entitles the one at home to equal shares. That's a very controversial one.
Is it?
Yes.
Isn't it clear?
Should it be?
Yes.
I don't think so. You see, sometimes we forget that in our setting, the one who goes out to work is often or is expected to be the 100% financier. It is not the practice that in our setting the wife should contribute anything financially. I bring the money, you manage the home. So at that level, you're doing your part, I'm doing my part. Then after I've provided the money and you have provided, if I'm able to save something else and acquire property, what you're doing is asking for extra premium for what you did without giving me any more premium for my providing for the management of the home, my financial provisions. That is what in many instances became quite controversial, because sometimes we tend to pick concepts from other places without looking at the cultural practices.
No, but the fact also is, you're bringing the money home. If there was nobody to manage it properly, even with the children, then you would not have a home.
Probably.
Would you be better off that way? Just bring in the money and not care about how it was being managed, utilized, and how the children were faring and how the home was running?
If there was a home without money, there will be no home. You probably will be thrown out of the house and you'll be on the streets. You will not pay the rent, you will not pay the utilities, there will be no food, no clothes.
So what are you proposing? I mean, it shouldn't be 50-50 when there's property acquired.
No,
on
what
the
is
side,
being suggested is that in addition to the household chores, you must show that you have done something else.
Such
For
as?
example, you're a career woman, you're working. Because you would have earned your own income, but because you have to manage the home, I persuade you to resign and stay at home, and I'm not paying you salary. That is giving up something in order to be able to manage the home.
Okay, how do I prove that you asked me to stay home?
Oh, well, it's always a question of evidence.
But what kind of evidence is there?
It was oral evidence, and in this case, often.
Isn't it what I say against what my husband says?
That may well be so, but why did you stop work? If, for example, now you're working, if you stop work, you have not been dismissed, and the only reason you stop work is to manage the home.
Oh, men are smart.
What would they say?
You could always say, oh, you know, she was complaining. It was too much for her to be caring for the kids and working at the same time.
Yes.
So we thought it would be best for her to stay at home.
Well, but you still gave up something. Your opportunity and your right to earn income for yourself.
But if the man insists that I didn't ask her to stay, I mean, she was complaining. So we thought, listen, stay
But
at
it
home.
was necessary.
So that in itself
Those
is
kind
proof.
of evidence will always, I'm sure, will sway any court, any judge.
So if you're not able to give evidence, I mean, if there's nothing that proves that you gave up something to do what you're doing,
or you made any other contribution,
then what happens?
Oh well, nothing.
So you don't get any share of what he has acquired on the side.
No.
Just the money that he brings home for you to manage.
Manage, yes. And you've been fed,
Really?
you've been clothed, you've been housed.
That's the recommendation you made?
No, that's not a recommendation. What we're suggesting is that contribution has been defined there. The definition here, we have changed it. We've proposed amendments to the contribution. Some of the things that were set out. If you go to the last, I think you see what was the definition, the interpretation session, what constituted contribution.
Okay.
Some of them we thought were rather giving too much premium to ordinary everyday things. But there are others which are quite tangible and they are recognized. And we think that, but you see the danger, and at the last bar conference, Justice Brobe, the retired Supreme Court judge, came to give a lecture on the current position of the law in respect to property rights of spouses. And in the absence of the law by Parliament, the Supreme Court, or the courts for that matter, are regulating the situation. They are saying the Constitution says equal access, and to that extent, you don't need to prove that you contributed anything. For me, that is more dangerous.
But if this becomes law, then you have to prove that you contributed something.
That's right. That's
Wow.
right. That is the bet, because the Constitution itself says jointly acquired. We don't jointly acquire property merely by being married.
Would you not be, I mean, would people not be, especially women, not be worse off? Especially those who are not well educated, who have contributed substantively but may not be able to prove?
That's entirely the basis for this law. The current situation is that often, even what women contributed in the past has been that a woman's duty is to help her husband. That is the customary position. And then we've developed and come up to the position where the Constitution is now recognizing that a woman cannot just be your supporter. And when you acquire property, she has no right or access to it. So now what you're trying to do is to provide you opportunity to say that when the man was constructing the house and you are going to supervise, cook for the workers, that entitles you to a portion. Right.
You know, what
in the past, that would not have been recognized. If you follow your husband to the farm every day, the farm you cook while the laborers are working or the man is weeding, you carry food home and so on, that would not have been considered a contribution. But all these have been reviewed, and the situation is that the women were often at a disadvantage. And therefore, the Constitution is now recognizing those efforts. Except that in the proposal that came before Parliament, I think that the proposal had taken it further than was expected. And that's why we're trying to
bring it back home.
Right. So this other thing about cohabitation.
Okay.
We have proposed that it be removed. Either married or not married. The definition of a couple is a person married under custom, under Mohammedan law, or under the ordinance. Any other thing, the suggestion is that wives have rights.
But girlfriends don't.
The girlfriends have privileges.
Laptops don't.
I don't know about the girlfriends have privileges. So they should not be brought to compete with the wives over their rights.
Okay.
After enjoying their privileges, they should stay there.
But you know, there are others who are not necessarily girlfriends, they just put up with the men. They even have children and things like that. Don't they deserve anything?
That's part of the definition of girlfriend. A wife is a person who has been married either under custom, under the Mohammedan's law, or under the ordinance, marriage ordinance. So one of these three, you must prove that you have been married under one of these three. Any other one. And you see, there was something which was also controversial. When the bill proposed that once you cohabit with a person for 2 years or more, then you are eligible to be considered as a spouse for the purposes of the bill. Then it went on to say that if you're married under the ordinance, then the cohabitee, the man for that matter, is not capable of cohabiting with another person. I thought that then this protection was for only the elite. But often the real victims are not the elite. So if you're going to provide for only the women who are married under ordinance, women who are not married under the ordinance, then you're cutting out a large chunk of the people who are entitled to be protected. In any case, the law says spouses, and the definition of a spouse is a person who is married under one of the laws that are applicable.
So you've scrapped that out completely?
That's our proposal. If the plenary accepts that, then it will be taken out.
Isn't it perhaps because the committee is, made up of more men than women?
Not necessarily. In this case, it was a joint work between Committee on Gender, Constitutional and Legal, all the women's groups you can think about. And for the first time as an MP, I saw 4 different Muslim groups sit with us throughout the discussion. We stayed in Goforodia for 3 days. We came to work here in Accra for 3 days. And they stayed through. Because you see, the Quran has specific provisions relating to property distribution, both intestate and before the demise of the party, And so they brought their own proposals. Except that in the end, we had to agree that when you're making law for the country, you can't differentiate. So the best way to deal with the situation was to suggest to them that you can always write a will and say that I want my property to be distributed in accordance with the Quran. That one.
Because this happens when you don't have any will.
That is the intestate one. But in this case, when both parties are alive, you're talking about, there are 2 laws and they follow one another.
Okay.
Whilst you're alive, if you separate, then
this law applies.
Yes, property rights of spouses apply. If one of you should pass on, then the intestate section also applies. So some of the definitions and proposals, the clauses, were used in both bills because their circumstances were similar.
Okay. So no provisions at all for girlfriends or laptops? That was new whilst you were on recess. That came up. We didn't know about it.
Well, I heard...
You had desktops in the office and laptops, when you're traveling.
I heard that from my good old professor, and I wonder where he learned that. Fortunately for us, he says somebody told him. So he can't speak positively to it. Probably the person misinformed him. That's otherwise, he's a very credible person. But this one, because he can't speak to it positively himself, I assume that he has been misinformed. That's why.
But you're not calling him to Parliament, are you?
I'm not aware of any move. I heard people say we would put him before. Well,
I know you personally like him. You didn't like what he said, but
yes,
you like him.
I like him a lot. He was my professor. But you see, the Speaker will not activate the process unless a member raises the issue on the floor. I hope nobody raises it. I'm sure tempers would have fled. I would have calmed down by now. I hope nobody raises it. But if anybody does, the Speaker may be compelled to refer the matter to the Privileges Committee for investigation.
Okay. One other issue, whilst you've been on recess, is the elections being moved to November 7.
Yeah.
That, if it goes through the processes, because there are processes that it has to go through before it comes, it would definitely come to Parliament at some point. What are your expectations?
Well, the only expectation, I suppose, is that it may reduce my cost by 1 month. The election cost
Really?
by 1 month, yes. But otherwise, it's within the constitutional mandate of the Electoral Commission. The law says that when there's a sitting president, an election may be held either 1 month to the end of the sitting president's term, or between 1 month and 4 months.
Okay.
So from December to September, the election can be held on any of these 7 December, 7 November, 7th October, 7th September. Right, but we have always had it 1 month before the expiration.
Yeah.
But some challenges are emerging, particularly when we have to go on second round and probably third round as it happened in 2008. Then there's very little time left for transitional arrangements and so on. And that's why...
Shouldn't we then have perhaps taken it to September?
It's possible. But I'm told that at an APAC meeting on an IEA roundtable conference discussion, the respective stakeholders agreed on November. And I'm happy that it's coming out of agreement of the stakeholders. So nobody will complain that is an imposition from here. So.
Is this something that would easily pass if he were to come to Parliament?
Well, the CI that the Electoral Commission would bring, the details of it will determine. If you put in the CI anything that is unconstitutional, then it will not pass. But normally, what happens is that there's something we call pre-laying. Before the paper is formally laid, the committee will discuss with the sponsoring agency, and then if there are any things that we find unconstitutional or against any other existing law or practically difficult to manage, then we'll advise and they may take it back, go and revise it. So when it finally laid, we would have agreed on all the things that are necessary, except that sometimes there's disagreement. And then we try to raise those matters on the floor of the House.
One other bill that is of interest personally to me when I realized it was also before the committee is the Conduct of Public Officers Bill. How far with that?
Well, that also, the committee has finished its work and we have reported to the House. I think in that case we have even started discussing it. It's on the agenda. But some issues were very controversial. Definitions of what constitutes gifts, harmonizing this bill with the existing declaration of assets out of public officers and who are liable to declare his assets and so on. So some aspects of the bill were referred back to the committee for further review. And that's the stage we are now. But generally it's a bill that is of public interest, and me, for example, particular interest to me because of the controversy surrounding what constitutes corrupt act in. For example, when Professor Adair accused us of taking bribes, I was on air saying that if the money you give me for driving from Bekwai to Akosombo to attend a meeting constitutes a bribe, then I might as well stay home. After all, I'm on recess. When Parliament resumes, you do all the things that when I'm going to Parliament, if you rise at 2 and I have to sit at a committee meeting, why not? But that one will not involve you transporting me or paying for my fuel. So you cannot accuse me of taking a bribe. But if whilst I'm on recess, I'm in my constituency, and you send me a text message, we want to meet on this matter, discuss it here. We're going to stay at Akosombo at Ada. And then I move my car there. It is only fair that you pay for the fuel.
Yeah, but usually the fuel they give you is more than the fuel.
Well, that's your definition of what constitutes. Well, because you see, cars are no small cars, so the safety is important.
Yeah, but you decided to buy the cars that the cars that you drive yourself.
So we don't kill ourselves on the road, and you don't have a by-election which will cost you a lot more than the cost of the vehicle. One by-election can cost you more than the vehicle. How many MPs died in road traffic accident in up to 2009? No, 2008 when they started buying a more secured vehicle. From that time, no MP has died in a road traffic
So the
accident.
vehicles are protecting you, in other words?
That's the whole idea. Otherwise, when I'm going to Parliament, you should, from between my home and Parliament, you should see the car I use. Very small one. But when I'm on the highway, meeting the articulators with that small car, the wind carried by that can lift me off the road and throw me into a ditch. So I need to be safe. And unfortunately, it's only in Ghana Parliament that you have to buy your own vehicle and buy your own fuel. And then when you have to reimburse me, you complain.
Because as ordinary citizens of Ghana, we're not reimbursed.
Hello, when you come to Parliament to work, you come with your employer's vehicle, don't you? So you don't need any reimbursement.
No, I come with my own vehicle.
Then you'll be reimbursed.
No, I'm not.
Oh, then it is part of your conditions of service. It's worked into it. But I do know, at least I've worked in the other parts of the public service before. And even as a private lawyer, I will not move from Kumasi to Sunyani Court unless you're paying fully for the cost of my fuel in and out, and even my engine wear and tear and my tire wear and tear.
So what if you're working on weekends? Do we still have to, I mean, because, you know, whatever you do is towards the work of Parliament anyway. So if we have to give you all the, you know, little fuel monies here and there,
why not?
Then some people still don't get it.
Is there any public officer who is not reimbursed for spending his personal money to do any public work? There's none. And it's actually, it would be unfair to let nobody in this country would say that his real wage is sufficient. So it is unfair to ask anybody to use his personal wage to provide public services.
So you've given this definition in this
yes,
law?
What constitutes a gift, what you cannot, your responsibility as a public officer to check any gift.
But is it fair? Is it fair that as public officers you'll be doing this work yourselves? Because this also concerns you.
Which one?
This
bill.
You know, bill on public officers, the conduct.
It concerns everybody, every public officer, and us as well.
You are not biased, you know, in looking at it because you're public officers.
Because you're not looking at yourselves. You're looking at the public service. Today you're here, tomorrow you'll be out. And so you're looking at what is fair. What can you legitimately claim? What can you legitimately accept or not? You know, so I think that, and that's why it's a public document. It's been published on the Parliament's website, and we're encouraging the public to make inputs.
Okay, so this has not left the committee yet?
It has. Actually, it has already been in Parliament on the floor of the House.
So if we make inputs, what happens?
You can still make inputs, and then it will be considered at the consideration stage. That is where we make the amendments.
Okay. You know, finally, because we have to wrap up, what's the calendar for the session? How does it look like?
So far, the agenda for this meeting has not been published, but we have 2 months, 8 weeks to sit. There are a lot of pending bills already, but there are always new things coming up which are the government considers a priority. And so I'm sure within the 8 weeks there will be a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And
I can't believe it. I had talked about the plant breeders bill, and yet I didn't talk about it with you. That's still before your committee.
It is. It has come back because there's so much misunderstanding and misinformation about what it is. You know, so when you're ready to go, people raise red flags and the speaker says, go back and look at it. Go back and listen to these people who are raising the issue. So we've gone back and forth so many times. So many groups come with the things, and we sit down and go through with them, and what they're talking about is different from what Parliament is doing. And so somehow, it is still with the speaker and the leadership, they're not sure.
You sound like you're tired of it.
I wish it would be done with, because actually, if you take your time to read through it, it is no different from copyright for musicians. That's what it is. Anything you will create with your intelligence, with your resource, with your research, the copyright to that is being protected. It is the same thing as an artist, musician or an industrial designer, you know. But because there's no protection now, there's something we call Abrabopa maize, which was created by the Ghanaian scientists. Now it's been sold all over. Ghana gets nothing because there's no law protecting the Ghana rights.
So that's your interest, protection, that's all?
Yes, that is how you encourage people to research and create new things.
Okay. All right. We'll have to leave it here, but now that Parliament is back, we'll have a lot more conversations on this.
Sure we
I am
will.
so grateful for your time this morning.
Thank you so much.
All right. So that's Joe Osei-Owusu. Joe Wise. He's a member of Parliament for Bekwai in the Ashanti region, also ranking member on Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. He sits on the Roads and Transport Committee in Parliament as well, and one more, which is the Appointments Committee. All right. Stay with us. One more issue before we bring you the big talk. Stay with us.